Hi, my name is Steven and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you about ignorance is bliss, how tuning out the world gives you an advantage in it. I'll be talking to you about how ignorance can be bliss and how it can maintain the happiness in your life. Oftentimes we think that knowledge is power and the more we have of it, the better our lives will be, but that's not always the case. In certain situations, knowing more than we should does not actively help our happiness. And in fact, it can help increase anxiety, uncertainty, and stress within our lives. As the technology and speed of our day-to-day lives gets increasingly more complex, it's harder more than ever to stay sane in this world. We are still working with the fight or flight response that our ancestors had, and every bad news cycle that comes our way, it increases our stress response. So with this increased stress response, we can use ignorance to our advantage to help calm us down. And I have used these tips to help me calm down and stay sane in this really troubling and complex world. And it helps me to filter out all the things that I don't really want to hear or don't want to know about. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about how ignorance is bliss, my tips on being ignorant, and my general thoughts. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, hit that notification bell if you like this content. And here we go. So for me, the idea of ignorance is bliss started way back in college with an English writing prompt. And for this prompt, I had one of two options, either write about ignorance is bliss or knowledge is power, and how it helps us in our lives. The professor polled the class and most people's response was to write about knowledge is power, the obvious choice. I was actually the only one in the class who actually wanted to write about ignorance is bliss during that time, because I thought the writing prompt was a trick question. Who doesn't want power through knowledge? And my professor really wanted me to write this ignorance is bliss paper. In the end, things came up and I didn't want to write a harder paper, so I chose knowledge is power. Because I had a full course load at the time and I didn't want to focus on non-engineering classes. But that conversation between me and my professor was not lost on me. I still think about ignorance is bliss even to this day. Because I always wondered why my professor was so adamant about me writing that particular paper prompt. And it's only because of my life experience that I understood why he wanted me to write about it in the first place. And I've come to the conclusion that we think we want knowledge is power, but we'll definitely settle for ignorance is bliss most of the times in our lives. Because it's not always easy to challenge our core beliefs when we learn about something new. Sometimes ignorance can be bliss for our happiness' sake. This conclusion alone disturbed me for some time because I thought that everybody always wanted knowledge is power. Although most people in their ideal minds try to seek advanced knowledge and change their beliefs, this is not always the case. And it's an uncomfortable truth for me to realize that ignorance is bliss and that some people operate on this every single day. But what I've come to realize is that it's not necessarily a bad thing. With a lot of knowledge, we overwhelm ourselves. We get stressed out from it. And it's really hard in this day and age to parcel out which is the truth and which is fiction. And sometimes it's just easier not to know every single thing in our lives and how everything works. I'm not advocating for complete ignorance. I'm advocating for a balance between ignorance is bliss and knowledge is power. So these tips are really to help you focus in and filter out all the bad knowledge that's out there. And focus in on what can help you and enhance your life through ignorance. So here are my ways to stay in bliss. Number 1, limit media consumption. As with everything going on these days, limiting your media consumption is one of the best ways to stay in bliss. There's so much sad and depressing information out in media these days, and if you watch it constantly or read about it, it can get you depressed. If you do want to keep up the news, use print media instead and read articles. Don't watch videos or go on social media for your news. Because this helps keep a buffer zone for your mind so that you're absorbing information more slowly, especially the bad information. Over the past few years, there's no limit to the amount of bad news coming into our homes. And I for one have tried my darndest to limit the media coming into my house so I don't get depressed. So limiting your intake on media can directly impact your mental well-being. And you'll also be able to save the time that you spent on media on other things that help you improve your overall mental health. So this one's pretty simple. Stay ignorant of media, especially if it's bad news, to help you with your mental well-being. Number 2, you don't need to know everything. I feel like it's hearsay for me to say this, but sometimes you just don't need to know how something works or whether or not you care to learn about it in the first place. This is because on a practical sense, we just don't have time to learn everything that we need to know in life. And if we do try to learn it, it comes at the expense of something else that might be important as well. In my early 20s, the world opened up to me and I wanted to learn as much as I can about everything. I had an inferiority complex and I wanted to be quote unquote good at everything that I did. It was a very lofty goal at the time, but looking back on it, it was simply unattainable. I started a 3D printing business, worked for a small startup, and even started my own blog during this time. These ended up failing because not only did they not align with the goals and passions in my life, but also I couldn't focus on other things that were more important to me at the time. There was also a need for me to feel smart about knowing as much as I can about everything. But ultimately this was a red herring because I didn't learn more than surface level stuff for these things that I failed at. I would argue that my knowledge in startups, 3D printing, and blogging really didn't do anything for me at the time. And at worst, they wasted my time that I could otherwise be spent on focusing on more important things or relaxing. So look and assess whether that piece of knowledge is worth it for you to obtain and spend the time to be committed on it. Otherwise, you don't need to know everything and you could focus your energy on something more important to you. Number 3, preserving wonder and mystery. Sometimes it's nice not to know how something works and preserve the wonder and mystery you have about that certain object. There's a popular saying that goes, you don't want to know how the sausage gets made. And this is simply because you just want the sausage to be delicious. You don't want to know the nitty-gritty of how it gets made in a factory. Because sometimes you might not want to know the gruesome and dirty details of all of it. And you want to keep that wonder and mystery alive about that certain thing. You don't want to end up knowing too much about it and disliking it or abandoning it. Here are some examples. Do you want to actually turn your passion or hobby into a lifelong career? Or do you really want to know how many partners your spouse had before you came along? In many real-world examples, I let the wonder and mystery remain alive. I don't go prodding around and asking questions about it. Because sometimes I really don't want to know the answer or change my opinion about that certain thing. This is ultimately because one of 2 reasons. The first reason is I don't want to lose my optimism about that thing or object. And the other reason is that knowing the truth about something can be really painful and jarring to your reality. For example, I've learned about certain negative things about my role models in life and it affected me deeply. And there's just some things that I want the good and optimistic part of it to shine through. It's not that we shouldn't learn more about people, especially if they've done something wrong in life. But I'm suggesting that sometimes we do need that positive role model that can be there and be a guiding light for us. We don't necessarily need to see the nitty-gritty of every human being and point out their flaws. Because keeping alive the wonder and mysteries of the universe can do wonders in pushing humans to do better than ever. We can do better for ourselves and achieve the impossible if we have something to strive for, that mystery and wonder. But if we keep getting beaten down by people that tell us we can't do it or that it's stupid for us to keep trying, then our future progress will be at stake. We need things just to be a little outside of our reach of knowledge so that we can strive for it. Ask yourself, do you want to keep that wonder and mystery alive, or do you really want to know the nitty-gritty details behind it all? Sometimes it's just more beneficial for you not to know how it gets done in the first place. Number 4, childhoods are us. For many of us, we view childhood as a distant memory, something that we've forgotten about. But if you look at how children interact with the world today, it's truly a sight to behold. For them, everything is new and exciting to the world. There's not one thing that they're bored at. Ignorance for children can truly bring the bliss out of them. With age, the modern world can continuously grind on us so that we lose our childhood spirit. It takes that wonder and mystery that we had as a child and dissolves it into a harsh reality. Some people do still keep that childlike sense of novelty and excitement alive, but others succumb to the daily grind of life and lose that excitement for it. I think as we age, we need to keep that childlike spirit of excitement and novelty alive within ourselves, and try to remember and feel the experience we had about discovering something new for the very first time. When we look at the world, we must remember the newness and ignorance that we once had as a child. This is important because the world that we live in is not static, it's changing all the time, and we must not look at it as if we know it completely. Examples of this is to try to reframe something in a new light, or get rid of a preconceived notion of someone or something, and ask yourself, how would a child perceive the situation that you're in? As you exercise this strategy and get more used to it, you'll realize that the way you view things will be completely transformed. And a brand new perspective of your environment can help refresh it and also alleviate some stress and anxiety that you might have from it. By going back to a state of wonder and excitement, you can allow yourself to transform and reframe that something and make it better. So here are my general thoughts on ignorance is bliss. The reason why ignorance is bliss and not ignorance is a lack of power is drawn on a simple fact. The more you know about something, the wonder and mystery that it once held dissolves into something boring and probably mundane. And the more we accumulate knowledge within our lives, the greater the chance that we become disillusioned to the world. What seems like endless possibilities as a child becomes much more mundane and process-driven as an adult. And that can slowly, over a long period of time, strip away that excitement and novelty that we used to have in our lives. At the end of the day, when I look back into my life, I was much happier as a young child when I didn't know everything and all the possibilities were in front of me. As I learned more about the world, the cold truth did not help raise my happiness. We might not be able to return to our younger selves, but there are ways that we can adopt new practices so that we can move forward and have some hope. And by limiting the harsh realities and depressing news cycles, we can provide ourselves a better foundation for bliss. And keep ourselves going forward so that we can dream and create a better future for all of us. So those are my tips on staying ignorant and keeping your bliss for as long as you can. As you might encounter in your own journey of life, there are some things that you're better off not knowing, for the sake of your mental health, stress management, and anxiety reduction. By keeping a few of these tips in mind, you can grow the excitement, wonder, and bliss within your life. So thank you for watching. Please leave me a comment down below on what are your thoughts on ignorance is bliss and whether or not you would rather have knowledge is power. And I'll see you next time.